CyberCube's latest version of Portfolio Manager offers to provide a new era of specific, actionable CAT modeling. I'm Yvette Essen, Head of Communications and Market Engagement for CyberCube. Joining me to talk about our CAT model is Jon Laux. He is Vice President of Analytics. Thank you for joining me. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit about Portfolio Manager to start with. What's its background and what are the kind of people and companies that use this product?
Sure. Thanks, Yvette. Portfolio Manager was the first product developed at CyberCube years back. It is our accumulation management software for cyber risk. To put that a little differently, the insurance industry is always grappling with the question about systemic risk and catastrophic risk. Insurers want diversification. The law of large numbers is a key mechanism to how insurance works. And catastrophe risk writ large is one of the things that challenges those suppositions, where many claims can arise at once, whether it be from a hurricane, an earthquake, some kind of mass liability, or in this case, cyber risk. And so Portfolio Manager is our solution for that. We're fortunate to work with really the whole spectrum of the insurance industry, from primary insurers and MGAs, reinsurers, the reinsurance brokers, as well as the insurance-linked securities community that are looking at and trading cyber catastrophe bonds now.
And how often do we update Portfolio Manager?
So we used to update it every year, and 2 years ago we made the decision to move to an every other year cadence. And that was a recognition both of the maturation of the product, as well as the breadth and the sophistication of the product, as well as the needs of our customers. As the modeling space for cyber risk has started to stabilize, we've found that every other year cadence is more appropriate, both for our own internal development process, as well as for our customers that need to work through change management when we do make updates.
And we are now on version 6. Would you mind highlighting some of the key differences between version 5 and version 6?
Yeah, sure. So version 6, we focused on, I would say, three big changes, and really two broad themes. So the first would be diversification. So as we do think about systemic risk from a cyber point of view, what are the aspects of accounts or aspects of a portfolio that can allow it to be better diversified than another portfolio that might be more concentrated? So we've looked at that. We've looked at questions around risk mitigation in terms of what are the qualities of individual accounts that make them more or less resilient in the face of systemic cyber events. And then lastly, all that's been undergirded by a foundation of a richer data set. We recognize that the cyber market is increasingly global. And so we've made some targeted updates to the breadth of our data, particularly for companies that might be looking to buy cyber insurance in Europe and throughout Asia.
I'd like to delve into a little bit more detail about some of those themes, but can we start with talking about our view of cyber catastrophe risk? How has that changed from version 5 to 6?
Yeah, so some things have changed and some things have stayed the same. I think it's important to recognize it's 2025. One of the things that we've had the sort of unfortunate benefit of in recent years, especially last year, was we've had a couple of events to learn from as we think about CrowdStrike, as we think about the Change Healthcare event, CDK, Move It the year prior to that. Those have all happened since we released version 5. And so we've seen some more in recent years, and it's been essentially 2 more years since NotPetya. If we think about the last event that was kind of more major scale and of heightened concern to the insurance industry. And so it's given us more resolution and understanding about some of those early points. If you think about the shape of the curve and those, the 1 in 2, the 1 in 3, the 1 in 4, maybe type outcomes of events. What hasn't really changed with V6 is our thesis around what tail risk looks like for cyber. We did a lot of work going into version 5 about that in terms of understanding the potential for global cloud outages, widespread ransomware or malware attacks. And we've done additional studies, published papers on what we call counterfactual analysis since that time. And all of that work is largely all that work has largely allowed us fortified the same thesis, essentially, that we had in version 5. So our view of tail risk is largely the same as it's been in the past, but we've offered a number of nuances with version 6 to understand how some of the nearer points on the curve might not be as extreme as we previously contemplated. And so a lot of that detail around how events can play out that aren't necessarily global in scope in the ways that companies might be more resilient than we originally thought.
Now, diversification has been a key theme of PMV6. How have we thought about it with regards to this release?
Yeah, so we've always had diversification available in the model through a number of levers. One of the core tenets of how we think about portfolio managers is the notion of a single point of failure technology. That's a technology like a cloud or a common software offering that many organizations use. So we've always had the ability to look at the potential for diversification along that, as well as just different industry segments, size of firm, geography. Where we've really put a lot of attention for version 6 really has to do with geographic variation. And I think it's a recognition that cloud technology in particular is becoming more and more adopted. And while there are a number of cloud providers globally, it's really the big three. It's Amazon, Google, Microsoft. And the regional solutions to cloud often are ways just to access something that one of the big three provides. So it really is three big concentrations globally. And so what we got curious about with version 6 was to better understand to what degree are these global cloud providers diversifiable? To what extent are their services concentrated versus distributed? And what we found is, again, the basic unit of analysis or structure of how those clouds are set up is the availability zone and the region. And each of those is set up to function on its own. And then organizations can mirror to other regions to have failovers and redundancies, which many of the large organizations do. And that's really how cloud's intended to work. But we also continue to see there are services that just by virtue of how the clouds operate still continue to be global in scope. And so we have seen some of those services, even if a single region is technically down, there's a service run out of that region that's effectively global. And so we've navigated that as we've gone along. And so a lot of care went into better understanding how the regional setup of each of the large clouds varies, where their data centers are, what regions are more concentrated than others, how much reliance there is between them, and how much failover there might potentially be. And then we contemplated that through both the chance of a single region being affected, multiple regions being affected at the same time, as well as the chance for global scale outages.
And risk mitigation too has been a key theme for this release. How have we considered that?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of discussion in the industry starting 5-6 years ago when ransomware as a service really started to spike. And so the industry's thought a lot about risk mitigation when it comes to what we might call attritional losses, this year's loss ratio for insurers, the in and out claims that insurers are regularly paying. But much less discussion's been had so far from the vantage point of ways to mitigate against catastrophic cyber risk. And so this was an area that we thought was new, but extremely important. The catastrophe loads on cyber risk are not inconsequential for the line. Again, in spite of some of those considerations about geography, one of the things we continue to find is that a lot of risk is still US risk. Many of the policies are still for US companies. A lot of the single points of failure are still US companies, and even some of the non-US single points of failure, like Tencent and Alibaba as cloud service providers, their largest regions are still set up in the United States, as an example. And so that diversification potential is still constrained. We expect that will change as the market continues to grow into new geographies. But mitigation becomes the other important way to manage around that constraint of capital. And it's also just what insurers exist to do, really, is help the companies underlying become more effective and more resilient. And so we needed to go back to, I'll say, ground truth as much as we can in that respect, given that there hasn't necessarily been well-organized data sets available to the insurance industry. And so we went back to working closely with cybersecurity experts, both the ones that we have in our team, as well as external experts that we work with, to really identify what some of those key methods are to mitigate against catastrophic cyber risk. And we came up with 3 factors that seem to be the most critical of all. The first being data backups, which we all know is particularly important in light of a ransomware incident or, an outage of, a cloud service provider, things of that nature. And then patch management and network segmentation. And we needed a way for our model to consume information about those. And so we created a basic lexicon for how insurers can enter that kind of data into our models, but we've linked it as much as possible with existing security control frameworks like NIST that most insurance underwriters are already familiar with and are probably using to some extent in their organization, even if they haven't been capturing the data in an organized way that they could put into our model, tomorrow. But we needed to start somewhere, and we felt like that was a very useful way to ground the information with the cybersecurity experts that are available in the industry, and then start to give our clients a way to understand the effect that taking some of these postures can have to mitigate that risk over time. Again, we expect probably the most potential benefit in terms of a widespread malware type of an event, because so much of the mitigation really falls on each individual company and their insurance policy that would back them up in that situation. To a lesser extent, also in a centralized outage like a cloud service provider, there's some ways that insurers can be more resilient in that situation as well. But we felt like this was a really important part of the conversation that's been missing before as we think about catastrophic cyber risk. And so we've been really excited to introduce these features and make them available to our clients.
It's been an exciting time introducing these new features and reviewing the model, but what happens next? You mentioned we don't necessarily have to update this every single year nowadays, but what are your plans for this going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's always new things that we're looking at. I think for any given release, we can only do a fraction of all the things that we potentially are considering doing. So we already have plenty of ideas for the next version of the model. The most important thing always is to continue watching the threat landscape. We want to continue learning from what life presents in terms of the things out there that we're available to learn from and adapt to as we see trends potentially changing or not. And then we continue to work really closely with our clients through this process as well. So understanding how we can continue to make this model more effective and more helpful for them for the array of use cases that they have is obviously of paramount importance. And, as I mentioned, we work with, the entire cross section of the industry. And so the use cases that our model is being put to only continue to increase. And so keeping track of all those and helping our clients find ways to be innovative and successful in the different pursuits that they're exploring is always something that's really exciting and gratifying for us.
More information about Portfolio Manager and changes made through PMV6 can be found on our website, cybercube.com. For CyberCube, I'm Yvette Essen.